we're not fully prepared or supported going through that, but that's something that I would like to help change in the work that I do. And just, I think that culturally it would be helpful if we just had more support going through transitions.
What's up, ADHD ear buddies? This is Gibson Tivers, and before we get on with the show, my dad has something to tell you.
Thanks, buddy. We just wanted to let you know that we're having another fall registration event this week on Thursday, September 7th at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 Eastern. Go to coachingrewired.com to get your name added to our fall interest list and to start your pre-registration process today so you can join us this week. Plus, for the first time ever, to help you spread your dollar a little further in this economy, we're giving all members who complete the program this fall 6 months of membership in our alumni membership community for free. And we'll have more information about that at the break.
Okay, now on with the show. Did I do it?
You did a great job, buddy.
Yay!
Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. Today's guest is Bowie Winnicky, also known as Rainbow. Rainbow is a gender doula and a neurodivergent support coach with a background in art, education, activism, and mental health. They are deeply rooted in the trans community and have a passion for co-imagining deeper levels of communal, accessible care. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It sounds like
I'm excited to be here.
The truck is welcoming you too. That was like in your background. It was kind of perfect timing.
I planned that.
Very nice. All right. So I'm actually super excited about today's conversation we're going to be having. I know we talked, several months ago-ish, we think. We're going to be exploring gender, coming out, unmasking, transphobia, and kind of what life can be like and the unique perspectives that we gain from kind of living life outside of the norm, I guess you can say, right?
Yes.
Give us your story. So you grew up in North Kentucky, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, tell us more.
Yeah, I grew up in Northern Kentucky in a pretty conservative Catholic religious culture. It's funny because now I live in I live in California in Long Beach, and I'm surrounded by a bunch of mostly liberal, queer, and trans people. So I think for a while I had a very binary view of these different times of my life, growing up in this one culture and now being in this other one. And one was bad, one was good. And now I'm more in a place of just holding the complexity of all of it. Even in this moment, I'm trying to find a way to talk about it in a way that's without judgment, but also being honest about what I experienced, I guess. But it was challenging for me as someone who is trans and also someone who is neurodivergent, because I felt there's so much more we're learning about that and that we didn't know at that time. And I didn't know. And there were just so many times where I really, really felt like there was something wrong with me. I felt like I don't understand why I can't be who other people want me to be. I don't understand why I keep saying the wrong thing, or the things I'm into are weird to people, but the things that I'm supposed to be into, I don't really care about. So there was just a lot of layers of feeling like I didn't fit in. And because I didn't really know, I didn't have a word or language for really talking about being trans. Even with being diagnosed with ADHD at 13, it still was very stigmatized. And I felt like the way that I went through that diagnosis process, I didn't come out on the other side oh, this is something that's unique and special about me and it has challenges and we can figure it out together. It was more oh, there's something wrong with me and I need to take medication to fix it. So I think a lot of it was later in life, kind of going back and looking back at my childhood, looking back at my story, and even more recently with my therapist, self-identifying as autistic, finding ways to be oh, these things that I thought that I was doing wrong or that were bad, were just normal parts of who I was. And in some ways are the most beautiful parts of who I am. And finding people who like we were actually talking about this before we started, finding people who love us for the things about us that make us weird, and not even simply tolerating it and not making fun of it and all of that. So I definitely feel like I just told that story in a very spirally way.
I mean, is there any other way to?
Nonlinear.
Is there any other way to tell a story though? Here, I mean, that's kind of that's what we do, right?
Exactly. So that's just kind of how I am. So yeah, I have some friends who can communicate just like in this very like direct, like, like, and I'm a spiral. So we all have our shapes.
There you go. Spirals also give a 360-degree, three-dimensional perspective, which I think is part of kind of what we're exploring today, right? Is this idea of like we have all these different sort of intersections of who we are and what those sort of unique perspectives actually can provide. Yeah, some of the times these intersections they're painful. Other times they can be very beautiful. And I think a lot of it depends on who we're around. I think it depends on community. As you kind of just said, it's like when you're the who you are is reflected back and appreciated and really embraced. It just makes a huge difference.
It really does. And that's the power of, I'm all about community and the power of finding community. And I also know it can be a process. It's not always easy, but I do think it's possible. And even like thinking about just like the larger systems, I think a lot about just even zooming back even bigger. Like for most of human history, we were hunter gatherers. For as long as we have documented human history, we have documentation of people living outside of the gender binary. So really, I'm like, well, is this idea of having to be perform in a way that we're living up to neurotypical standards, this idea of living within this gender binary, which is enforced often through violence and bullying, that's actually kind of new in the grand scheme of things. And like
It's
animals,
this past weekend. So we're recording this on June 27th. This past weekend, I was at the Chicago Pride Parade, and like, there's a couple of times where I just got really kind of emotional about it, and just like, and I took my son a couple weeks ago. There was another Pride Parade in one of our local suburbs, and just like thinking about there are places in this world where like if you showed up to a place like this, you could be jailed or killed, right?
yeah,
And it's just like it like doesn't make sense to me because it's just like pure joy and celebration of humanity.
yeah,
So like on one hand, it's like so beautiful that we can do this together, and then on the other hand, it's like what I just don't understand. Like what it's 2023, and like there are laws being put into place, and even in our country that they're trying to because shit like drag shows, that's a danger to our youth. Like seriously.
it's so infuriating. And there's the levels of anger because on one hand, I feel like people are taking issues of like, okay, this is going to be maybe a little mini trigger warning. Like people are taking issues of child sexual assault, and instead of actually dealing with that, they're scapegoating queer and trans people. Oh, I'm noticing myself getting angry talking about it right
Yeah.
now. It's like we could actually address the issues, or we could just create this circus of pointing fingers and smoke and mirrors and distracting people from the real issues and blaming people who aren't the perpetrators, while the people who are the perpetrators are getting away with it. Like, it's just so mind boggling. But it also is like, I think there's layers too, because I think there are people who truly do feel fear and are uncomfortable with trans people and like legitimately are trying to do their best and I believe are causing harm in that. But then there are people who do know that what they're doing, like I think there are people who do know what they're doing, and there is a political strategy of scapegoating and attacking trans people right now. And it's not, it's not just us, like it's also, I mean, this has been done against immigrants. This has been done against Black people. This is like a strategy that is very old and tired and that we need to let go of as a culture. But yeah,
Mm, no, it's sadly it's a strategy that unfortunately has worked for a lot of folks, and it is frustrating when, especially when there's so many parts of who we are that are othered, that um being able to have the courage to step into your most authentic self, it's the I think about this in the realm of sort of like the cost of masking. Like early on in my career when I was sort of like very, you can sort of read between the lines as me being a clinical social worker with ADHD. Like if you look at my website, back, a decade ago, like it wasn't super explicit that I had ADHD. It was like kind of like suggested in some blog posts that they wrote. And then like when I started the podcast and it was, well, it's out there, I was able to step into more of who I am. And when we're able to not have to put energy into masking, we can actually like have some executive function left to actually do the things we're trying to actually do versus trying to just be something that is different than who we actually are. And then there's nothing left to actually do the things we want to do. So it's like all this energy being put towards trying to meet some bullshit like expectation from other people instead of just being the best versions of ourselves.
Yeah.
I just think it's so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, it's kind of making me think about like Alok, who wrote Beyond the Gender Binary. They're like, what if we could just all be free? Like, what if we could just release these expectations of living up to some made up standard of who, like, what makes you like a good human or what makes you likable, like all these things that we've culturally constructed and just like be ourselves and like, I mean, obviously having compassion and love for each other and like I don't know if standards is the right words, but like just having like, wanting to live in a good way, but that's completely different than wanting to like, yeah, it's almost like the masking takes away from us being able to live in a good way, I feel.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We were as we were talking about before hit record. It's interesting. Like after, so I got divorced about 3 years ago, and one of the things that I've come to realize, and this is from just some feedback from some people on my team, because people from my team have said, what happened to the parts of yourself that you used to share more of on the podcast? I think it was a very fair piece of feedback. And when I realized, like, during my divorce, I felt like my life was such a shit show that I'm like, I just can't, I'm not in a place to share right now, And so I kind of just, I kind of remove myself more from my personal story over the last couple of years. And I'm like, now starting to come back to that. And so, after my divorce, I found myself in a relationship, a steady relationship for about 2.5 years. And that just recently ended about 6 weeks ago, as of this recording. And then just this last, a week and a half ago, met someone who also identifies as bisexual. And, I was sharing with you, I don't think I realized how stark of a difference it is to feel the difference between being accepted for being bisexual versus actually being liked, the fact that I'm bisexual, like that's an attractive piece to that other person. And it was kind of like surprisingly overwhelming to me and how just like, I don't know, like, I don't know if healing is the right word, but it could kind of hit me really, really hard. I was like super emotional about it and like in this really kind of beautiful way. But I was just like struck by, wow, like it's like a huge, huge difference between acceptance and actually being valued for that difference.
Yeah, it really is. And I think there's so much there in what you just said. I think it's so beautiful. I'm feeling the power of that. And I'm resonating with the piece about visibility and boundaries and like how much to share and when to share. And I think it ties into unmasking, it ties into coming out. I think that when I first came out as trans, like 10 years ago, I felt a lot of pressure. I was like, I'm going to be open about everything all the time. And then there were times where I noticed people would like ask me really personal questions and I would answer them. And then afterwards, I'd feel like, oh, wait, like that didn't feel quite right. So it's like finding that balance of, and then sometimes it's like right when you're going through something, it's like, I actually like can't talk about it in a certain way right now. Like, so I think there is a pro and con, but then I also notice that I don't feel good on the flip side when I like hold myself back when I do want to speak up and do want to share. Um, so I mean, for me, I'm a very like kinesthetic, somatic person. So the more I've been able to like the long process of learning how to listen to my body and listen to like what it's telling me, like usually that helps with the boundaries. But yeah, I was just even thinking about being on this podcast. I've been thinking a lot about I am scared of getting pushback for being visibly trans because right now in this culture, like people who are visibly openly trans do get pushback and like hateful comments and
Mm,
doxing and all of that. And at the same time, I'm like, but I don't want to let that stop me from living my truth. And I do feel like I do have a lot of privilege and a lot of support. And there's ways that I feel like I'm able to do that. So I don't think for anyone listening, like, I don't think there's a right or wrong way of going about it. I want to release like all the judgment if people decide to not share or like, or wherever you're at. Like, I don't think judgment is helpful. And I want to release that. Yeah, for me, I was thinking about that and I, um, was reading Audre Lorde. I love her work. It's just like it always hits me so deeply. But her essay, I think it's called "The Transformation of Silence into Language," and she was talking
ooh.
about, yeah. Honestly, it's like hard for me to paraphrase her stuff because I feel like each sentence is so loaded. I'm like, you just have to read it yourself. But like, what I got from it was I think she wrote it in the 80s. She's no longer with us on the earth plane, but she's a Black lesbian, and she was talking about like, I am gonna be afraid whether or not I speak up because of this world that we live in.
Mm.
And she wrote the essay like after she had like a death scare, and she was just like, I feel like whether even though I'm afraid, I can still speak my truth and I can still share what I need to share.
Isn't that the definition of
Eh,
courage? It's like doing the
yeah,
thing even when you're afraid.
it really is.
No,
It really is.
just based on that title, I was feeling that very, very viscerally. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
mm,
No, that's how I feel when I was reading her work like 2 days ago, and I literally like kept going like, "Oh," like it hurts and it like opens me up and it just like I feel it in my body.
let's do
But
this. Let's take a real quick break. When we come back, I get a more of a maybe a definition from you about what a gender doula is. I don't know, and then we'll see where we go from there. Because who the hell knows? So we will be right back. Support for this podcast comes from ADHD, reWired's coaching and accountability groups. Learn more at coachingrewired.com. We're close to finishing up our summer season of coaching groups, which means our fall season is coming up fast, starting on October 12th. That also means that registration for our fall season is underway. If you missed our first 3 registration events, don't worry, there is still time, but not a lot of time. So don't wait any longer. Go now to coachingrewired.com to get started with your pre-registration process so you can join us for our next registration event this week on Thursday, September 7th at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. That's this week, Thursday, September 7th at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 Eastern. So what's this pre-registration process and why, if we know that multi-step processes can be challenging for people with ADHD, why does our pre-registration process seem to involve so many steps? That's a great question. To my knowledge, our coaching and accountability groups are the most intense ADHD coaching program out there, which means we are looking for people who are highly motivated and able to commit to 5 to 7 hours a week for 10 weeks. And the reason we have you watch a pre-recorded video all about the program and answer questions about it is we want to make sure you're not just jumping in impulsively and that you really understand what the ADHD rewired coaching experience is all about. We have found that the more we have asked our prospective members to do to join, the more committed our members coming into our groups have been. And as a group coaching program that has a structured accountability as a key part of the program, it's in everybody's best interest that the members of your group and your accountability team are fully committed to growth just as much as you are. While there may be other group coaching programs out there, and some may cost less, none are as intense or have a nearly 10-year track record of providing evidence-based group coaching to over 1,000 adults with ADHD. There is a reason why we've been recognized at the International Conference on ADHD as a featured innovative program. When you meet with your coaching groups 3 times a week and check in with your accountability team daily, you really can get your ADHD rewired. And because we know that after 10 weeks of coaching, you're still going to have ADHD, ADHD, we offer ongoing support with many coach-led and peer-led sessions in our alumni membership community. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, for the very first time ever, because we know that many of us now are really having to watch our money due to inflation, to help you get the most out of the investment in your growth, when you join us this fall, we're including a full 6 months of membership in our alumni membership community for free. That's about a $240 value. Stop letting your ADHD hold you back from achieving your goals. And if you're unsure of what goals you even want to set, we can help you with that too. If it feels like your good intentions fall to the wayside no matter how much you try to plan, or it feels like you have no idea how you're actually spending your time, or if you're tired of beating yourself up because you keep falling short due to your ADHD, ADHD reWired's coaching and accountability groups will help you go from just trying to manage your ADHD to thriving with ADHD, all while showing you how you can do this with grace and self-compassion. Imagine how transformative your life could be if you created a personalized, actionable plan that works with your unique ADHD brain while learning alongside other adults with ADHD who just get it. If 10 weeks of intensive and transformative coaching alongside other adults with ADHD and continued support beyond the 10 weeks sounds like something you want to add to your ADHD toolbox, head on over now to coachingrewired.com to get started with your pre-registration process so you can join us for our next fall registration event happening this week on Thursday, September 7th at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 Eastern. You can join me Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 Eastern, or you could sign up with one of our other fabulous coaches in the morning or evening and get $500 off when you join one of their sections. You can check the website to see the full schedule. And again, for the first time, we are including 6 months of membership in our alumni community after group is over to help you continue working on the most important thing that you could work on, you. Sure, our ADHD can get in the way sometimes, but that doesn't mean we can't live a full and intentional life. When you join our intensive online coaching and accountability groups, you'll find more than just tips, tricks, and strategies. You will also be supported by a community who truly understands you. You won't have to do any of this alone. Join us this fall. Get started with your pre-registration now by adding your name to our interest list at coachingrewired.com. That's coachingrewired.com. And we are back. All right, so part of what you identify professionally with as a gender doula. What the hell is that? I have no idea why I just had this weird accent when I just said that, but we're leaving that in.
It's part of it. So yeah, gender doula, as far as I know, like that as a term for a profession is new, but I do feel like as a action or function, it's something that's been around for a long time. Yeah, and I guess I'll just answer for myself because I know other gender doulas who might answer differently. But I see it as someone who tends kind of like the transition or the process of someone coming into more authenticity with their gender, a more authentic gender expression. So this can look like with someone who's going through a medical transition, kind of similar to when you think about a birth doula, like they're not the doctor, but they're supporting someone through this big process alongside the doctor, and they're offering like the support that is kind of outside of what the system already provides. So it can look like support with navigating these processes of either going through a physical medical transition or even like social boundaries coming out. I help people with even like spiritual processes and practices that work for them. So also, a lot of queer and trans people are neurodivergent, and it can help to have someone, especially someone who's been through a similar process before, help with figure out all the steps of even if you've changed your name, reaching out to the people that you have to contact to change your name, just like all these little steps along the process.
So you help people through really identifying their, like, just coming into their own. And for some people, that involves transitioning. And
Yes.
so I think there is this. It's something that I've been really, really kind of interested in for years. Hearing the experience of someone who has gone through transition, who has ADHD, and who also struggles with transitioning, and is there an overlap, and like what is the uniqueness of that neurodivergent experience for people who have difficulties with the executive function of transitioning, and
Yeah.
then the gender
Um,
transitioning.
yeah, there's a part of me that wants to name that. I do use the word transition for like gender transition, but I know other people that I'm in relationship with, they prefer like becoming or different
Mm,
things. I guess for me, it makes sense in the sense of like, well, and it's interesting too, because I think that if we reach a place where we allow children to just be themselves their whole lives, they may not have to go through a transition to be themselves. Like they just are. If you're not masking, you don't have to like unmask in that similar
yeah.
way. But yeah, I do think that going through and I see the overlap with going through like coming out, going through a gender transition, and coming into your identity with like ADHD, autism, neurodivergence. And I feel like I'm getting a little off the point of trying to come back around. Could you
I
help
wish
me?
I wish listeners could like see your face right now, because that knowing recognition of like, okay, train of thought, stay with me. I'm losing it. I'm losing the thread. Crap, what was I just saying? It was like all over your face, and I so relate to that. Okay, so we can refer to the transcripts because that's an accommodation. So when we forget what the hell we were talking about, we have a record of it. It's great. Scrolling back up. Let's see. It was about the overlap and the sort of unique experience of transitioning from an executive function transitioning to the transitioning
Okay.
gender wise.
Okay. Got it. Okay. I think I'm going
So,
to zoom out
okay.
and then zoom back in. I feel like I want to provide some context about how I think about this. I feel like I know that like neurodivergence can often be associated with trouble with transitions and needing support with transitions. And I also think about how in our current culture, I feel like we need more like rituals and more support just generally as a culture with transitions. For me, that looks like tending to like the seasons and having like processes to help me like transition throughout my day through the different times of day. And I think that's a role that a lot of cultures have had and do have. And that kind of ties into what I see my role as a gender doula is like supporting through transitions and through a shift. So I think that for those of us who are neurodivergent in this culture, transitions can be really hard because we have these expectations of all or nothing. We have to go from here to over here. And how do I get there? And what are the steps I have to take? And not just the actions I need to take, but like, how do I need to change my perspective? Like the little things that all add up. And I think sometimes we're not fully prepared or supported going through that, but that's something that I would like to help change in the work that I do. And just, I think that culturally it would be helpful if we just had more support going through transitions. So I think that for people who are going through like some type of gender transition, who are also neurodivergent, and whether that or not that looks like, it doesn't have to look like going on hormones. It doesn't have to look like a name change. Everyone's process looks different. And for some people, it is just allowing yourself to express yourself more freely and releasing some of these expectations of how I need to be because of my gender. Um, for me, during that part of the transition is as you're releasing these layers and allowing yourself and playing and like exploring different options, there's also the level of like the transition of, okay, in the past, I would have handled this situation this way, and that's not working for me anymore. So I need to find a new way that feels more aligned and like kind of playing with that. And then also like sometimes we need to do nervous system regulation. Like, oh, like it's a little stressful. Like I used to do things this way. I'm not doing it that way yet. I haven't quite figured out the new way. So I need to like do some deep pressure. I need to like take some extra sensory breaks. I need to have community and support. Yeah.
Hmm. coming into your own, into your, transitioning, coming to your own, whatever term you're comfortable with using. How the more you for yourself been able to come into who you are, how would you say that's impacted sort of your neurodivergence?
Mm, yeah. They definitely feel connected. Um, and even though I kind of feel like there were different stages, like, first I was diagnosed with ADHD and I started to kind of understand that. And then later in life, kind of unpacking it, understanding it more. And then I was identifying as queer and then learning about that. And then I started identifying as like a trans man. And then I was like, wait, no, I'm non-binary. And then like, the most recent is like understanding autism. And so there are ways that like each of those things, learning about other people's experiences that are similar to mine and being like, oh, my experience is similar to this other person, but it's different in these ways. And meeting people who are like also going through similar experiences and just being able to talk openly about that has been helpful. And I feel like with each level, it helps all the other ways I understand myself and all the other aspects of myself. Like with understanding autism or even just like ADHD, unmasking, not putting so much pressure on myself. Okay, wait, let's. There's so much I want to say. It's like
I can
using
see it
words
all
to
over your
express
face too.
thoughts is. But I guess what I'm thinking about now is like, okay, so like with trying to be someone that I feel like other people want me to be or trying to express myself in a way that's like fits in, there's both the layer of the gender and the neurodivergence. And one thing I've been working on is just like allowing myself to show up in a space just as I am, trying to, not feel like I need to show up in this masculine way or feminine way and not show up in this like way of being extroverted and like all these different levels of ways that I feel like I've taken on that I should be and allowing myself just to show up as I am.
When you said the word, when you said extroverted, so something that I've been noticing for myself is when I sort of am allowing myself to play with more of my sort of like feminine energy, I feel like my extroverted self comes out like a lot more, which I have found to be very interesting. Like, I don't even know what that is, but like I remember a couple weeks ago when I was at one of our local county's Pride Festival, and they had this great drag show, and I was just like, I could so do that, because it's so like outrageous and like just seems so playful and fun and like just it's like the epitome of just like not giving any shits, and you're just there to like just play. I was just sort of struck by that, like how strongly I felt like, oh, I could totally do that, and I would be. I felt this like my inner extrovert was like wants to come out, and it wants to be like center of attention and do like just do all of the things, and it's because I'm actually a quite introverted person, like I'm very like one-on-one conversations are my jam, like leading groups is one thing because it's like I know where it's going, but like having larger group stuff that's way more sort of organic, like a team meeting, that's actually kind of draining for me. That's something I've been sort of discovering about myself over the last year or so. But just that like it's like this permission to play, where it almost feels like it's just weird. It's hard to even put into words. It's like this by putting on a mask, in a sense, you're taking off a mask. Does that
Yes.
make sense?
Yes. It does, because I've performed in the past, and drag, I feel, is such a powerful transformational art form. I feel like it's very important actually, like, and there's something about stepping into a character and like embodying this energy of, for me it was like embodying these parts of myself that I had felt a lot of shame about and just like turning them up to the max. And then performing and being celebrated.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
Mm. There is something that's also like for me, like stirring the pot a little bit is always just it's got a little bit of a dopamine hit. Like how can I kind of push the boundaries a little bit? Like even in the most like innocuous kind of ways. So I play a lot of pickleball. So I discovered that I find using a pink ball is the easiest ball to see. And it is amazing. And all like the 50s and 60s something men who are like clearly uncomfortable with my fucking pink ball. And I just like kind of rub it in their face a little bit. Like not in a rude way, but just like, what are you not, confident enough in your masculinity that you can't play with this ping pong? And I just kind of find it hilarious and kind of love, like secretly love that it makes him really uncomfortable. And I don't know what that is, but it's kind of fun.
It is. Like, I feel like for me, I'm someone who likes to present pretty androgynously in the way that I look, and it confuses people. And sometimes it is stressful because we have already talked about all the reasons why. But like at the same time, as I've learned to like shift away from feeling shame about being different and to embrace myself, sometimes there is a part of me that kind of does enjoy confusing people a little. Like, you have this idea of these two genders and that they should both be this way. And I'm kind of disrupting that a little bit for you. And you're going to go home and think about this probably.
There's a certain joy in that, isn't there?
There is.
Because it's like we're not hurting anyone with this at all.
Right.
It makes people feel a little uncomfortable, but like in a way that kind of hopeful, as you just said, like make them think.
Yeah. And it's like, well, maybe you could consider like, why don't I have a pink ball? Pink balls are fun. Pink is a fun color.
Absolutely. Oh man, I guess it's funny. My sunglasses that I wear are also very like they are women's sunglasses. Like they have sparkles and like little diamonds on them, and they're pink. And they're like, I just love the look of people's faces. Like they're just trying to figure me out, and I'm just like, what? Let's play some pickleball.
Let's play some pickleball. Let's go.
All right. I'm looking at the time. We got to jump in for one more really quick break. And so when we come back, we're going to talk about something else that I haven't thought of yet. So there is a very messy, not smooth segue right there. And that's how we're going to leave it. So we will be right back. And now it's time for your favorite segment, an ad for a product that doesn't exist, but we kind of wish did.
Dad,
What?
wait.
I'm trying to record an ad.
Wait, Dad, before you do your ad, my new invention is complete. And I really think your listeners are going to love it.
Really? What is it?
You know how sometimes you get so focused, you forget to have fun?
Well...
Or you know how sometimes I can be kind of all over the place and have a hard time settling down?
Yeah...
Well, Dad, and ADHD reWired listeners, it's time to dial in your inner squirrel with the all-new squirrelometer.
The what?
The squirrelometer. So, you know that thing that's on the wall that controls the temperature?
The thermostat?
Oh yeah, the thermostat, yeah. And the thing that tells you how fast you're going in the car?
The speedometer?
Exactly, but have you ever thought, gee, I wish I could control my squirreliness? Well, say hello to the squirrelometer.
What?
The squirrelometer. It's a revolutionary pocket-sized device that helps you dial your squirrel up or down depending on your needs. We know life with ADHD is a roller coaster, and this little gadget is here to balance the highs and lows like never before.
Really? So how does it work?
Well, there can 2 things you can do. 1, you can up the squirrel. Feeling too focused, turn the dial to nutty, and unleash a dash of chaos. My favorite. With fun prompts and random activities, you'll shake up your routine in a jiffy. Or you can down the squirrel. Can't sit still, time to turn that dial to focus. Then get custom focusing tips straight from ADHD experts to calm your mind and zero in on what matters. Oh, Dad, and here's why I think your listeners are gonna love it. It's user-friendly, designed for people who can't even program a coffee maker. It's portable, fits in your pocket, take it to the office, the playground, or a fish concert. Squirrelometer doesn't judge. Backed by science-ish. Okay, you got me, not really. It's a lot of fun, and sometimes fun is all the therapy you need. Side note, this device should not replace your actual therapist.
Well, this product isn't real.
Hey, how do you know?
Support for ADHD is real. And here at ADHD reWired, we've got spaces and places for all different kinds of support.
Well, back to inventing. Whee!
like in our Adult Study Hall community at adultstudyhall.com. It's free for the first week and only $19.99 a month after that. There you'll find our 24/7 drop-in room, weekly facilitated sessions for things like decluttering, creative work, accountability check-ins, Pomodoro dance parties, writing, your most dreaded tasks, and we even just added a few more events that you can learn more about at adultstudyhall.com. And we even have our Friday celebrations that we call Fridays. We get to share your weekly wins and celebrate your success because encouragement is contagious and we all deserve to celebrate our wins. Go to adultstudyhall.com to learn more. We also have a private Facebook community where you can apply at ADHDrewired.com/community. And there's been some really fun discussions happening over there right now, and we would love to have you join us. And if you have a burning ADHD-related question or issue you're looking to solve, you can join me and the ADHD Rewired team every second Tuesday of the month for our monthly live Q&A. Go to ADHDrewired.com/events to register so you can join us live on Zoom for some sometimes very ADHD Q&A fun. That's every second Tuesday of the month at 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern. That is next week. And yes, next week is going to be episode 500. We're going to do a special episode for episode 501 because this is a big celebration. But you can find everything that we do, our coaching groups, Adult Study Hall, our Facebook community, and more at ADHDrewired.com. That's ADHDrewired.com.
And now, back to the show. Whee!
All right, we are back. Okay, so I have heard, and I imagine that you have heard, that there's a high correlation in the trans and LGBT communities for those who also identify as neurodivergent. I even heard and I was like reluctant to if I wanted to even bring this up because I couldn't identify or cite the original source, but I think I heard that in NPR that there was like 60 or 65% of people who identify as trans also identify as neurodivergent. So I just want to put that disclaimer off. I don't know what that research actually is. I can't cite that. So if you're listening to this and you're like, no, that's not accurate, like just let us know and we'll issue a correction. But what do you what's your take on it?
Yeah, I'm sure we have someone in the audience that can give us like the exact information. We have a smart community here.
All right, research nerds, go to my website and send us the actual the up-to-date stuff so we can set the record straight.
Yes. I mean, I've read about it and I've definitely seen it also, just as someone who is in a lot of community with a lot of queer and trans people, and like a lot of us are neurodivergent and are like identify that way. Or I mean, I remember I met someone who had a kid like who was trans and had a kid who was autistic, and I don't know how the kid identified, but he was like, yeah, my kid loves hanging out with all my trans friends because we just are so supportive of him being autistic. And there's just like a lot more of us who are. And I mean, there's always that part of me. It's like, why is that? Like, is it because we're neurodivergent in some way that we already don't really fit into the norm, or we just think differently and feel more free to express our gender? Is it because our gender doesn't fit into the norm? The social norms don't make sense anyway, so then we feel more free to express our neurodivergence. Maybe it's a little bit of both.
One theory that I've heard is this idea that for people who identify as autistic, they just don't give a shit about what people think. And so they're just like, it's easier for them to like just be what they feel.
Yeah.
Like, do you think that like that's part of that?
I think it could be, but I don't know if like, I mean, maybe it depends on the person.
Yeah.
And maybe it depends on their level of like
true for all
trauma
things,
and
right?
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think there is a level of like I do remember just like even being a kid, the norms and the expectations, I was like, these just don't make sense to me. Like, why is pink a girl's color and why is blue a boy's color? They're literally colors. I don't understand. And no one ever could explain it to me in a way that made sense either. And then you find out later that they actually were both socially constructed. At one point, boys were associated with pink and girls were associated with blue. So it is cultural and constructed. But yeah, I think there is a level of like not being so motivated by like these external expectations or like not resonating with them.
Hmm. And I wonder too how much of it is just it's a almost a I don't know if a vehicle to in a way of like it's like a playfully loving way to kind of just say fuck you to like people who just like don't want to get it. I don't know. It's probably for everyone it's just it's different, right?
Can
And
you
it's,
elaborate on what you're saying? Like a playful, loving way, like
yeah, just like how like presenting in a more non-traditional way of whatever that is, whether it's visibly queer in some way. Like I'm thinking about, I was in Boys Town last week in Chicago, and I'm like, I want to be friends with all of these people. They just all just seem so much fun and like delightful because they are pushing the boundaries of what society has sort of said. Like, this is what quote unquote normal is supposed to be, and there's this sort of this like, it's like a positive vibe of just not giving a fuck. I don't know. Like,
Mhm.
do you get that sense or what?
Ooh, yeah, like yeah, kind of like this. I mean, if yeah, it feels like it does kind of tie into what we were saying before about like there is like a little bit of an enjoyment and like I'm not doing things the way everyone else is doing them. I'm doing them in my own way. Haha. And like kind of like stirring the pot a little bit when I think the pot needs to be stirred. And then also like finding the confidence of like and this is what I feel like I try to help people like on their journey through is going from feeling like there's something wrong with me, oh no, like I'm weird, to being like, wait, I'm here. People are saying I'm different for all these reasons. And instead of hiding it, I'm going to own it and lean into it and find the beauty and power in these parts of myself, whether it's like the way I communicate, the fact that I need to go take a sensory break, the accommodations that I work with, while also like allowing myself to be kind of ADHD and spirally and like finding that balance of like working with myself instead of trying to fix myself. And then, yeah, the gender stuff and being like, actually, like, I mean, a lot of queer and trans people I know, like, I mean, not all of us, but a lot of us like love to play with fashion. And I'm like, what a beautiful gift to just be pretty.
And
Like,
it's so funny you say that because like sort of like the cisgendered version of myself, like I fucking hate shopping. But when I'm going to like go shopping to like, get something that's maybe a little bit more feminine or just like playful, like then I kind of like think it's fun. And it's something I've kind of been recently discovering. And it's like it's like this wonderful paradox in some ways. It's just I don't quite know how to explain, but I'm enjoying kind of discovering it.
yes, I love that. I'm so excited for you. And I relate, like, when I first started identifying as trans and like playing with gender expression, I was like, oh, wait, I do like shopping.
I mean, maybe the reason that I hated shopping for so long is because I kept putting on these like the cisgendered clothes that just felt so boring, and it's like no wonder why I was like, this sucks.
Right? Like, I feel like a lot of men's clothing in America, because it is very cultural, but like a
Yeah,
lot of men's clothing in America is very like navy, black, like gray. And it's like, okay, is that all we're going to get? Like, is that like, can we have like a range?
remember the '80s. The '80s were great. Like the obnoxiously loud fluorescents. Those were great. I mean, I don't know about the shoulder pads. That wasn't so good. But the
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what? The beautiful
oh
thing is now
man,
we can kind of pick and choose
yeah.
from the different eras.
Oh man. Okay, so I know we are kind of running out of time here. What do you want to share with listeners about if we can give them just something to maybe think about in the realms of gender and identity and how this all sort of fits together or doesn't fit together? Give like a message. What's your
Mm.
do you have a bumper sticker slogan?
Well, yeah, one of the things that I say a lot that's coming to mind is like labels are so, so helpful and so beautiful and empowering. And I encourage people not to get too hung up on the labels if they can, because I always say labels are helpful until they aren't.
Mm,
Because there's no word that can really fully encompass the complexity of any of us. We're trying to use this limited human language that's also colonized and all of this to describe like our profound and multifaceted experiences. And it kind of makes me think of like that Buddhist idea of when you say the word moon, it's like a finger pointing to the moon. It's not the moon itself. So
Mm.
I think sometimes for people who are new to coming into an identity, they're like, am I trans? Am I this? Am I that? And there's definitely room and space for that. But I also think it can be helpful to, as much as possible, find spaces where you can just play and just explore and see what feels good and learn about things and be like, ooh, this resonates, this doesn't. And along with that, because of social media and because of technology, it's really, there's so much information out there. And I know sometimes people who are coming into a new identity will be like, I have to learn it all right now and feel all this pressure and so stressed. And
Especially when you're
I just want to,
neurodivergent. That's kind of how we roll,
yeah,
right? Like here's my hyperfixation for the next like several months to years. I'm gonna learn everything I can about this thing.
which is beautiful and powerful. And, when you can, it's helpful to take a breath, maybe
Yeah.
go for a walk, take breaks, like take a shower. Cause sometimes we need those moments to integrate all those things we learned
Yeah.
and just kind of breaking down
Mm.
the all or nothing thinking like you don't have to be perfect, there's no perfect way to be anything. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just take the steps, the baby steps, one step at a time. And usually before you know it, after a year, you'll look back and say, wow, look how much I changed over this past year.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I know for me, like reflecting back a couple of years, 5 years, 10 years sometimes, where I'm like, I literally can't believe I am where I am today. If I were to think about where I was, even just 5 years ago. But
Yeah.
when I'm going through like a period of like intense growth, I feel like it can't happen fast enough. So I just started a little while ago with I'm in my going to be going into my 6th week of EMDR as a trained therapist. I'm talking to this therapist and I'm like, all right, like you want to spend all this time doing this like resourcing, and I'm like, let's just get into it. Come on, let's just get into it. Well, I totally like disassociated after like the first session, and it was like. So the second session, she was like, all right, let's slow that down. And I was like, okay, that's probably a good idea. And there's still a part of me that wants to like go full in. Let me feel all the feelings as intensely as I can barely like tolerate them, because I have a sense that I know it's on the other side and I can't wait for that.
That's so relatable.
Oh,
Yeah. It's so relatable. It's hard to slow down, especially when you have ADHD.
it is so
Like,
hard. It is one of my
and
hardest things is slowing down. And it's and it's like it's just amazing how often I can think that like applies to a particular situation for me. And it's just like, okay, slow is hard. Slow is hard.
ugh. And that's like, even just with the perspective of like taking baby steps to change, it's like sometimes we got to take baby steps slowing down. Like,
Yes. And yet that's also the fastest way to grow is to go slow. It's this
yeah.
paradox. It's like, because when you try to do all the things, you end up doing none of the things.
Exactly. And it doesn't help, I think, that social media and everything, I think sometimes we feel like we see the end result and we don't always see people in process for
So
whatever
true.
reason. And so
So
sometimes
true.
it can be like, oh, and you don't see like the years that it took for this person to get there. And again, it's a practice.
Yeah.
Don't have this figured out, but I'm trying to practice like finding joy in the moment where I'm at, taking little breaks. Like I have all these reminders like on my phone, all around my apartment, and like constantly reminding myself. And I constantly get caught up in all of the stuff. And then I have to just keep coming back as much as I remember, as much as I can.
Mm.
I have to give a shout out to the book Rest is Resistance by Trisha Hersey. I feel like that book changed my life. Highly, highly recommend.
All right. So your website, Rainbow Chrysalis, CHRYSALIS coaching.com. Don't worry, the link will be in the show notes. And any final thoughts or places people can reach you?
Yeah, you can find me on my website. I feel like my email list is probably the best way to get updates, but I'm also on social media. I have my one-on-one offerings and then actually like co-planning an event about neurodivergent spirituality with one of my friends. So like, yeah, I'm having more events and stuff coming up too. So it's all in
Awesome.
the works.
Awesome. Well, Rainbow, this was a delight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was lovely.
This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening, and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find time-stamped summaries and additional resources for each episode. Apply to join our free and secret Facebook community. Learn more about our award-winning intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. Join the Adult Study Hall virtual co-working membership community. Find all the other podcasts on the ADHD Rewired podcast network. Sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content that you won't hear anywhere else. And use the search tool to find episodes on specific topics. You can do all of this at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click on the Patreon button. If you are a regular listener, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to you, the listener, but it's not free to produce. Plus, patrons get cool perks like ad-free episodes and access to recordings of coaching calls, and $25 a month patrons can join me once a month for a group coaching call. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHD Rewired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. Subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube to see selective interviews and other videos I've made. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends, family, your therapists, your coaches, doctors, siblings, parents. And if you, your coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at the website, ADHDrewired.com. If you are a member of CHAD, ADA, or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this show and all the shows on the ADHD Rewired podcast network. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. And if you really loved this particular episode, please hit share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I do count on you to help spread this message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other app that supports reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at Audible by going to audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. Here is my list of must-listen-to audiobooks updated July 2021. Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Attached by Amir Levin and Rachel Heller. Atomic Habits by James Clear. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson. The Coaching Habit by Michael Stainer. The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Rest by Alex Sujong Kim Pang. The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins. Make It Stick. The Science of Successful Learning by Peter Brown. The Productivity Project by Chris Bailey. Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. I always recommend to my coaches and admin that they read that book. The One Thing by Gary Keller, a required reading for all of our coaching group members. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Baden. The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. And if you're looking for something a little bit more magical, I have fallen in love with the Harry Potter series, and the narrator, Jim Dale, is amazing. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus, all of her stuff is great, starting with Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, and The Power of Vulnerability. And if you're an entrepreneur or leader, be sure to check out her book, Dare to Lead. Do you have something that you would like to share? Click on the podcast tab at ADHD Rewired. Click the button to be a guest at the top of the page and schedule a 15-minute interview. This is Eric Tivers, reminding you to keep learning, growing, and connecting. Self-care is not selfish. No matter what you get done or don't get done, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. And we don't need to do them in the hardest way possible. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.